Sarath Fernando from Sri Lanka, with your 1/8 of 1 acre, you hear there from the macro level, right at the top, what do you sense is going on as a farmer?
I'm happy that there is some discussion about food prices. This should have been given much more serious attention a long time ago. Because, at least in Sri Lanka, about half the population have been living in a situation where the prices have been beyond their reach. And this has been the case.
With your small holding, what is the future for you in Sri Lanka?
As a person living or farming 1/8 of 1 acre, I can't survive with that kind of land. But there are communities, villages, large regions of hundreds, thousands of people who are compelled to live on small plots of land. Now, together, there are ways where they could survive. They could survive much better than the way they are told to survive by big powers, the big companies, the big multinationals, the World Banks and others. My 1/8 of an acre, I know that I can make that soil much more fertile, much more productive, much more diverse, and even restore the ability of nature to regenerate itself. That can be done by millions of small farmers.
Let's look at a big multinational food producer. Jan Kees Vries, how do you assess the scale of the change and the speed as well?
When we look at it, I mean, we produce fast-moving consumer goods, and so we rely on agriculture for the bulk of our raw materials, not just for our food products, but equally so for personal care products or for detergents. What we see is a continued strong growth in demand from India and China for reasons that have been mentioned. In a world where supply and demand are almost in balance, so whenever there is a disruption, whether it's a drought or whether it is political unrest in certain countries, all of a sudden, even if only a small proportion of supply disappears from the market, the prices swing up fairly rapidly.
Do they go down as well?
I don't think there is short-term any reason to expect it will go down. But the effect it has on consumers is vastly different. Let's remember, please, that in Western Europe and North America, people spend about 8% of their spendable income on food, which has come down from 50% after World War II. Whereas in most developing countries, people spend up to as much as 50, 60, or 70% of their income on food. So if food prices go up in Europe with 50%, people would go up from spending 8% to 12% of spendable income on food. I mean, you postpone buying a new car for a year and basically you're done.
Let me go to Sean Rickard. As the business economist, we've heard how fundamental this shift is. You want more industrialization. Why are you saying that is good?
I say that's good because what we've really heard is the demand side of the equation. People are saying there's greater demand for food and the demand has increased above supply. What we need now is to bring supply up. And we know from history that's what's going to happen. So we're not going to see prices rising year after year after year. Yes, there's been a change, but the industrialization of agriculture will bring more land into production. It will raise the productivity of that land and it will check those food prices and allow us to meet all our needs in the future.
For more details of the dramatic trend of the price rises, global cereal stocks expected to fall by 2% this year. That means they'll be at their lowest level since 1983. Wheat stocks fell by 11% last year. The price of some wheat varieties soared by as much as 52%, above the price just a year earlier. Maize prices reached a 10-year high during 2007. In January this year, soybean prices rose to a 34-year high. To meet the projected surge in demand by 2030, cereal production must increase by nearly 50% and meat production by 85% of 2000 levels. So is the age of cheap food coming to an end? Is the situation as serious as the dramatic price increases suggest? Is there an advantage from rising prices? Well, let's pick up on that. Raj Patel, it is serious, we've heard about that, but you're saying that the market now is punishing poor choice when it comes to who produces what.
One of the problems with the increased spread of the rule of markets in food is that safety nets have been taken away. And so whereas previously farmers could rely on a certain minimum support price for their products, now if they choose badly, they go out of business. And so some of them don't merely go out of business. But there's now an epidemic of farmer suicides, particularly in South Asia, but around the world, of farmers whose backs are so far up against the wall that in the end they despair.
Why do you say, Gary Howe, that the food chain now has to be reorganized?
I think we understand that the supply has to be expanded. We have more people consuming. We have more people consuming meat, which requires more and more staple goods. The question is, who is going to produce it? And I think that is the major choice of the day. Is it going to be industrial farming, as Sean says, or is it going to be small farmers, as the small farmers say? Now, I think this is it's a crucial question of the moment, because when Sean says the industrial farming will put more land under production, whose land are we talking about?
We're talking about land in Russia and Latin America. And we know from history that we can't rely on small farmers to do it. We know that they, I'm sorry to say, have more or less got to give way to larger farms in order to get the productivity to feed ourselves. That's been the experience of the developed world, and it will be the experience of the developing world.
Can I give you a number on that? That we're talking here about 1.3 billion people, the smallholders of this world. 1.3 billion people who rely upon small-scale agriculture for their own livelihoods, and we're talking about the displacement of those people. Where are they going to go? To the cities? 550 million people moved from the countryside of the developing countries to the cities in the last 25 years. In order to absorb that population, the rate of growth in urban areas has to be very, very fast. Can we afford that? Is it ecologically possible? Is the fuel bill payable? No, I don't think this is a sustainable approach. I think that we have to go back and say the smallholder farmer is there in the countryside, has a productive capacity, and I think we should look at history there. That China, India, and Vietnam, the growth stories of the last 10 years, have been based in their agricultural expansion on the small-scale farmer. The idea that the small-scale farmer cannot respond to that supply challenge, I would put to you, Sean, is a myth.